How we doing, Gills fans? Welcome back to Gills in the Blood TV. Hope you're all well. Thought it was going to be quite a quiet week this week with no midweek fixture. So me and Boz did our two-part Twitter question and answer session, which was very well received. So thank you for everyone in getting involved with that, supporting it, liking it, retweeting it, and obviously those that sent in their questions. It's massively appreciated. We thought obviously that'd fill a gap with not much else happening during midweek. And then we had this published by our chairman, Mr. Paul Scally, an 8-page document regarding all things Gillingham Football Club. We've also got Adys Presser's pre-Peterborough press conference to get through, and then obviously we'll be looking ahead to that match on Saturday with our big game preview. So we will crack straight on with Adys' press conference, condense it down, pick out the key bits for those that weren't able to watch it live. So yeah, let's get straight onto that. Firstly, explain that there was individual and collective chats with squad members and the group as a whole after Saturday's debacle at Rochdale. Tended to repeat himself a little bit for me. He said that the boys have responded well in training and they're training well during the week. We did plenty of shape work, can't wait for Saturday. We hear that most weeks. But yeah, so that's him. He said he's looking forward to the game. It can't come quick enough, blah, 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 blah. Touching on Rochdale more specifically, he said he felt that was the first time that we've gone out onto a pitch as a group of individuals rather than as a team, and that was the most disappointing aspect of it. I'd like to say that I thought all 4 goals conceded were pretty disappointing as well, but he spoke a lot about the fans and us as supporters and how he needs us and he needs Priestfield rocking for the remainder of the season. We have to help the players out, we've got to remain positive, but at the same time he does appreciate that it's the players' responsibility and him as a manager and the coaching staff to give us things to cheer about. He said it's a two-way street. Got quite excited, started going on about balloons and ticker tape and toilet roll in Argentina 1978 and us doing all we can to make the atmosphere almost like a carnival. But for me, AD, bottom line is it comes down to you, your boys play well, and then obviously we'll create an atmosphere as well. It's a two-way street, as you said. He touched on obviously the chairman's letter that come out recently. He said all the new stadium plans are very, very exciting. He even said they're very close. I'm not sure how close very close is. I'm sure we'll find out in time. There's meant to be more publications coming out regarding it in the near future. But he said for him it's obviously all about the here and now and winning football matches. But he said the plans on the whole though look unbelievable, so we should have that to look forward to, which is great. He was mentioned about the new approach to scouting and recruitment that Mr. Scally touched on. He was asked about that, and AP said obviously every manager, every coach is different, but for him he always goes into great detail when looking into players before purchasing them or signing them on loan or whatever, or a free transfer. Looks at everything in terms of their ability, technical aspects, injury record, character. He says for him there's never ever any stone left unturned. Then he went on to talk about our players again and said he can't complain about any of our players again, which I thought was a little bit odd considering the under-12 comment last week immediately after Rochdale, but I'll come back to that in a minute. Was asked obviously about players and fitness for the weekend, and he joked that 20 tonne of cotton wool had arrived at the training ground this week to wrap them all in. Another slight dig or thinly veiled dig is that at players that he perhaps perceives to be a little bit soft or a little bit too injury prone for his liking. He mentioned people sometimes take pills for absolutely everything. He said he's not one of them. He's a big believer in nature taking its calls, etc, etc. But obviously he said everyone's different, everyone's pain threshold is different. In regards to the defenders that are missing, Deji and Ryan Jackson, he said they'll be last minute. We might not know up until about 12 o'clock or so on the day of the game. Josh Wright's obviously back. Harry Cornick will feature, and it looks like Rory Donnelly's going to be available. So at least we've got some bodies back and some more options. That's a good sign. Spoke a little bit about Max Amar. Said it's been tough for Max, and he's aware that he's not playing as well as he can. But he's obviously not playing in a settled back 3 or 4. He's had different partners every game from week to week or whatever, and it doesn't help anybody. But he said in terms of Max and in himself and everyone else, there's no moping around. he did mention that players maybe played out of position again this Saturday, so we've got that to look forward to. He said Chris Hurd's definitely a no. People know my opinion on Chris Hurd at the moment. I'm not going to go into it again. But he did talk at length about Harry Cornick, and obviously to sum up was basically saying he's a very hard-working footballer. He's got great ability, bags of pace, and he can't wait to see him in action, and hopefully he can hit the ground running over the last 7 games. In terms of our opponents, Peterborough, he said that they're a very good footballing side. They like to get it down and play, but they're very, very inconsistent. He sort of laughed and said, obviously they've got very good individuals, but let's hope that it's the poor posh that turns up to Priestfield on Saturday and not the good one. But he can't reiterate enough again, and it's a little bit of copy and pasting from previous press conferences. It's all about us and it's all about what we do. He said obviously it's great that if other teams can help us out and do us favours in and around us, then that's brilliant news. But it's all about us. He says we have to embrace our current predicament. There's no point moping about. We don't want any negativity around the squad, which I find a little bit funny again, because it goes back to this comment last week in his press conference before Rochdale, and he said he's not going to slack the players off or dig them out, and then obviously we lost and he come out with the under-12 comment. But to defend himself, he did mention that obviously he's very frustrated after games and angry or whatever he said, and he spoke to him, and it was the first time that he's had to lock the dressing room door after a full-time whistle since he's been at the club. And in his defence, he said, I only get 10 minutes to try and come up with something to say to the press, and obviously everything's a little bit raw, so it's up to you whether you let him off or don't. It is what it is. It ain't going to change. He said he knows he's probably too honest for his own good sometimes, and he mentioned the fact that he's a supporter as well as a football manager again, and I've touched on that with Boz in previous videos, and I know plenty of other people have on social media. He spoke about Bradley Garmston, said that he's had some good reports back from him in the Far East in Qatar regarding his hamstring injuries, but he's not back in the country till the 31st of March and he won't be available for a while. I've said myself, I think we just write him off for the rest of the season and see if we can get him back for pre-season and good and strong and fit, ready for next year. He was obviously asked about Joe Emmanuel Thomas because it was mentioned in Paul Scally's letter. Obviously we're aware now that from this publication that we're still liable to pay Jets wages up till the 20th of May, which included, it seems, the playoffs and the playoff final. So maybe that was a little bit of misguided confidence at the beginning of the season, but you can understand why we did it. We'd have looked stupid if we'd not covered that and then actually reached the playoffs. But we're all aware that's just a distant dream now, unfortunately, and something for next season, fingers crossed. But he said, yeah, it was his decision at the end of the day. He checked it over with the chairman and they had a good chat about it, and it was agreed that we send him back to QPR, and we move forward with what we've got, and we work hard with the players that we've got at our disposal. So yeah, that was pretty much it in a nutshell. I hope that covers everything, and I will now have a look in more depth at Mr. Scally's 8-page publication. So this is it then, 8 pages that were given to us over the last couple of days. Gillingham FC, a letter to all supporters from the chairman. There's a range of things in there if we just have a quick flick through, and then I'm going to pick out the points that I think are key. Dear fellow supporters, obviously a little opening paragraph, and then he goes on to talk about the team, the Medway local plan, drafts for obviously a new stadium at Mill Hill, which is not too far away from the current ground. There's a small chat about Centre Plate, which was our previous catering suppliers that we're now in dispute with. A little bit about long-term future, actually quite a lot about long-term future, which is good. They touch on our dear friends Millwall coming down in a few weeks. Recruitment, season tickets, supporters club, bond schemes, there's plenty in there. And then obviously there's a conclusion, but I'm going to go through the bits that I think are key and give my opinions on them, and hopefully you guys comment on the video at the end or reply to the tweet, and we can get some healthy debate going, because let's face it, it'd be boring if we all agree on everything. Obviously he touches on Justin Edinburgh being sacked halfway through the season, saying it's not ideal, no one likes disruption, etc, etc, but there was one line that stood out for me, and that was, but my job is to put the club first, and I remain certain it was the right decision that was made. Regarding the sacking, I have no dispute in that. I still stick by the decision that Justin was sacked at the right time. But obviously, at the time you couldn't foresee or have a crystal ball and say that Adys Presser was going to be the right or the wrong appointment to replace him. You had to give him time, etc., etc. But that comment, but my job is to put the club first, and then about a paragraph later, he says about in terms of recruiting a replacement, I neither had the energy nor the desire to start a process of interviewing another raft of managers to replace Justin. He's talking about his obviously heart problems at the end of 2016, but for me it comes across a little bit as plenty of Gillingham fans have stated at the time and had their concerns when we appointed Adys Presser alongside Jamie Day and Stevie Lovell. Was he the cheap option? Did it come across as jobs for your mates, etc., etc.? And them two lines for me, unfortunately, sort of reiterate that point. And looking back now, you'd think it does sound that case. If he's saying he's desperate and wants the club is always the first forethought of his mind, how can you then turn around and say that you had no desire to do a proper interview process when you want to replace an outgoing manager? Especially when there were people like Steve Cotterill, Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank, Chris Powell, Kenny Jackett, all available at the time, and we was only 8 points off the playoffs when Justin Edinburgh was dismissed and relieved of his duties. We mentioned, myself and Boz, I think in our question and answer session, it was part 1 the other night, that we was a viable option for a big name at this level. Back in January, because we were still in with a shot of the playoffs with half a season to remain. We're quite clearly not at the moment, are we? Let's be honest. There's no point dressing it up and sugarcoating it. So find that a little bit odd. He also mentions that he's had no contact from Justin since giving a reference for both him and David Kerslake to the Northampton chairman. So what? It's got nothing to do with us, without being rude, Paul. You're coming across as feeling hurt that Justin's not phoned you to say thanks. Football's football. It's a bit cutthroat, isn't it? There's how many times have we heard Adys Presser saying his press conferences, oh, there's not a lot of nice people left in football. We just have to get over it and move on. We've got our own concerns. I'm sure Justin and David Kerslake have got their own concerns. So just get on with it. We don't need to be reading about feel bad. It comes across as just feel bad for me because Justin's not phoned me up and said thank you very much. Why would he? You sacked him. Bottom line. Again, similar to Adys Presser's press conference, there's a line. It goes without saying that we all have a role to play this season by turning up and helping the team, by making a noise, by showing passion, by encouraging and being positive, and by making Priestfield a fortress again. I know this is a given for the majority, but please stick with the team. Obviously, you want us to do that. We've got no issue with that. But at the same time, again, Paul, we were sold a dream back in the summer of championship quality players and playoffs, etc., etc. And the goalposts always seem to move for me, because now we're talking about we're still in a position to achieve our first aim for which is every season, which is to avoid relegation. Where's the ambition? Why does the first aim always have to be to avoid relegation? It can well be, I suppose, but don't come out and say it publicly, because fans just think, oh, it's little old Gillingham again, and we get fed up with hearing it, to be quite honest. I think it's not wrong to be ambitious or to show willing to want to improve and want to make the step up. And it's great going that the fans are brilliant and we do this and we do that and we've got to make noise and help. You've got to give us something to cheer about. You, directors, in terms of appointments. Did you do that with Adys Presser? Only you can answer that, Paul. And then it goes down further to said coaching team, which is now Adys, Jamie, Steve. Before that it was Justin, David, Wayne, etc., etc. They have to train these players to their full capabilities to then get them on the pitch on a Saturday or a Tuesday and give us something to cheer about. We'll make all the noise we can if there's something to be noisy about, but you have to understand that when we've had a season like we have had this season, sometimes it's not that easy to be jumping around and singing and screaming and shouting and cheering everyone on, because there's nothing there to cheer on. The Medway local plan, he says, is basically just about a new site. He mentions that he first produced a document in 1999 about plans for the future and that. So it's great to hear Adys in his press conference say about it that apparently it's pretty close, but these things are never instant, I understand that, but until we start seeing something concrete, metaphorically and literally perhaps, I believe it when it happens. Like I say, it glosses over centre play. I'm not going to go too much into that. It's not of a lot of interest to me because it's not what happens on a football pitch, and that's my first sort of port of call in terms of my love for Gillingham Football Club. They're effectively taking the company to court over what they perceive to be lost money because of centre plate walking out on a contract. So yeah, that's about it in regards to that. I'm not going to go too much into depth on that. The long-term future obviously mentions how long he's been there, 22 years now. And this is a bit that gets me again, and it comes back to this little Gillingham attitude. He asks a series of questions. So should we be envious of our colleague clubs who play in the Premier League? Most certainly yes, but in a healthy way. Should we stop believing our club could one day be playing alongside these clubs? Absolutely not. That's quite categoric and quite bold, that statement, Paul. But then again, it comes back to in terms of your recruitment of a new manager and the fact that you said in here, for one reason or another, and I appreciate you was having health troubles at the time, you couldn't be bothered to go through an interview process, so you stuck with people that you deemed to be the safe option, I suppose. And now we're in the mire in terms of a relegation battle, unfortunately. I think again it comes down to this attitude that we've got to shed ourselves of we're only little Gillingham and it's been worse than this before. So what? It's been better than this before. It was better than this for 3/4 of last season. So it's about the here and now. Would it be an extraordinary feat to get to the Premier League? Yes, for sure, he says. Is it possible? Definitely yes. If it's definitely yes, then some people might ask you the question, why are you employing non-league managers when there were perfectly capable League One managers available? Are we deluding ourselves? No, not at all. I'm not so sure with the current attitude that we seem to have as a football club. Do I believe GFC have the potential to achieve Premier League status one day? Yes, without a doubt, he says. I keep repeating what I'm saying. It's how do we achieve this? New stadium, more income. So obviously he spoke about the plans for the new facilities, which is great, which brings in more money. But what's our average attendance? About 5,000, give or take. It's nice having it all in writing, saying we're ambitious and we believe this and we believe that, but you have to put that into practice in terms of recruitment and everything else that happens on a day-to-day basis in terms of running a football club. I'm not an expert, I'm not professing to be, but for all these nice words that we're seeing written in this document, we still look like we're little Gillingham when it comes to the things that matter, I suppose, such as appointing Adrian Pennock. And I love Adys Pennock, you know that. Plenty of people that have listened to me on here or talked to me in the ground. He's a club legend and I've got a lot of time for him, but being a club legend doesn't make you a successful football manager. It talks a little bit about obviously not having the resources of plenty of sort of foreign owners that have come into the game now, and that's understandable. I've got no issue with that. You can only stretch your budget so far, Paul, and I think we've said, and plenty of us have said this year, in terms of what he did for Justin Edinburgh at the beginning of the season, it was admirable, and he kept putting his money where his mouth was, which was great. He talks that he says, I'm currently in talks with several potential funders, all of whom understand the needs of the club to progress in line with a new stadium and enabling development. Excellent. Again, that's great news. It sounds like he's talking to people, potential investors. But have we been here before? Again, until it happens, it's a pipe dream. It's just cheap talk. And that's something that can be linked to a lot of aspects of a football club in terms of, like, going back to when he appointed Adys Pennock and it was, there's still X amount of points to play for. We need about 2 points a game and we might get in the playoffs. Now we're talking about, we've got 7 games left to achieve our first aim for the season, and as it is every season, and that's to avoid the drop. So that changed a lot in 2 months effectively. So forgive me if I come across as a little bit negative and a little bit cynical, but proof's in the pudding, and we're not seeing any pudding at the moment. A little bit about Millwall, basically saying the same that he said last year, so expect Millwall fans in the home support, I suppose. Recruitment, this was touched on by Adys in his press conference about, well, I'll read the thing to you. In terms of player recruitment, we recognise the importance of good player recruitment, and indeed we clearly have to go into greater detail when we sign players going forward, looking at character, home life, age, and more importantly, injury and availability. He then goes on to talk about, as a club, we cannot afford to be paying players wages and that they're not featuring for us enough on a consistent basis. Be interesting to see how we change this then, because you can only scout surely so many ways. Obviously some people have higher pain thresholds like Adys touched on, but injuries are injuries. It's part and parcel of the modern game. I'm not sure we can do too much in terms of guaranteeing that we're going to sign a player who's never going to get injured, but we shall wait and see. Season tickets have been mentioned. It looks like there's going to be a price freeze for the next 2 seasons, whether we're in League 1 or League 2. So that's a great deal if you're in League 1. If we get relegated and it's still the same price, I'm not sure too many of us would be overly excited about paying nearly £400 for football in the basement division, but fingers crossed we can get enough points over the next 7 games to stay above the dreaded line. There's something to do with a 2-year season ticket option, but it's only going to be available to the first 1,000 applicants. And they talk about finance being available, but in terms of season tickets, and just going off on a tangent, for me they don't do enough for us that spend out a lot of money on one each season, because like this Saturday there's a deal for any season ticket holder can get 2 kids into the ground for £1. That's great if you want to take your kids, but what if you haven't got kids? What benefit have you had? So why can't they introduce, like, I don't know, buy a season ticket, get your replica shirt half price, or 5 free beer vouchers or something like that? It doesn't have to be massive amounts. I don't think us season ticket holders are asking for the earth, but give us something back, that's all we're saying. Or discounts for students, I don't know, discounts for, I don't know, group bookings or anything like that. We try to do that now in the Brian Moore stand, but in terms of me and my season ticket, the only perk I seem to get is the fact that I get a small discount off what I'd pay if I ordered my ticket on the day. And that's great, and I appreciate that, but £400 still a lot of money to lump out in one go. Right, just to conclude, he goes on about, we won't quit trying, we will overcome our short-term issues, because ultimately we are a great club with great supporters that also regard Gillingham Football Club as their club, their passion and their life. Yep, we do. I think you're stating the obvious a little bit. But just to sum up, one thing is for certain: if we don't believe, we won't achieve. Each and every one of us must believe. This again comes back to me for this talk is cheap and this little Gillingham thing, because it's all right putting this in a document and how much we believe and how ambitious we are, but I've not seen anything in the last few months to suggest that we really believe we can be anything more than we are, and that's a little bit frustrating. We had a brilliant season in 2015-16 up until about January, and then it started to slip a little bit. But bottom line is, we probably did overachieve in a sense. We finished our highest position for quite a number of seasons when we finished 9th in the League 1 table. Obviously it was frustrating and disappointing and heartbreaking, because it actually was the lowest position we'd occupied all season. I don't think we dropped out of the top 4 up until about game 42, but we've gone backwards since. We've effectively retired 2 of our big name signings. Jamie O'Hara ended up in the Big Brother house. Paul Konchesky's now playing for Billericay on a part-time basis. We've signed a player that could never play for us in Bonds and Gala, and the whole season just smacks of a disaster, unfortunately. Sorry, I'm just going off on a tangent there and a little bit of a rant, but there's plenty of nice things in this document, I think, to sum up, and plenty of wonderful ideas and strategies, etc. But until we start seeing it in fruition, then I'll keep repeating myself, talk is cheap. Why do we have to be little Gillingham? Why can't we be ambitious Gillingham? We think we can get in the Championship at the very least. We want to believe it as fans. It's up to you, Mr. Scally, and your directors and all that, and potential funders, etc., etc., to make it happen. Right, Anyway, on to Saturday and another massive game for the Gills at home to Peterborough United. They turn up, just looking at their form, they're not in the greatest of form. They've only won one of their last 8 or 9. Yet one win in their last 8. That was at home to Rochdale on the 25th of February, so they're a month without a win effectively. They've drawn their last 2 away at Chesterfield and at home to Oldham, 2 teams that are down the bottom. And in terms of away form, their last 4, they've not won any of them. Draw with Chesterfield, lost to Bradford and Millwall without scoring, and lost to Walsall without scoring. So 3 goals away at Chesterfield represents their only output in terms of goals in their last 4 away fixtures. Unfortunately, being a Gillingham fan, and you all being Gillingham fans, you know that doesn't mean a lot this season, sadly. And I think Bolton pitched up last Tuesday, had 1 in 4 away. I'm not saying that Peterborough are in the same class as Bolton Wanderers, but we tend to help teams out when they're on a bad run. Anyway, so let's just have a look at the local paper, the now Thursday edition of the Midday Messenger, because they've changed it up and moved it a day forward. There's obviously a bit about lack of defenders, which Adys touched on in his press conference. You'd hope that we can get one of maybe Ryan Jackson or Deji Osalaja available for Saturday, so that we can play 3 at the back if that's what Adys wants to do. But for me, I'd rather go back to a flat back 4 and play 5 in front and a striker up front. Try and make us more solid, more hard to beat. We've got Josh Wright can come back in this weekend. For me, he goes straight back in the side alongside Mark Bird at the base of a 4-man midfield. But I want us to play a back 4, if that means, if we can obviously have Dickinson and Amar in there, if we can get Deji back to play either left back or centre back, and Mitchell goes to the other position, and hopefully we can get Ryan Jackson fit to play at right back. If not, maybe Ollie Muldoon can play there. I'd like to get Scott Wagstaff higher up the pitch. I'd like to see him and Lee Martin as natural wingers, and Daki beyond Josh Parker would be my pick this week. But we'll have to wait and see. Adys said in his press conference that it could be as late as 12 o'clock on Saturday before we find out if any of the injured players are able to return. The only one that's definitely out is Chris Hurd, and for me that's no problem at all. That's just my opinion. You might not agree, you might do, but I don't rate him at all, sadly. Cornick boost for Pennock though, which is, this was mentioned in the press conference this morning, but there's a column here about him which is great. Gills boss Adys Pennock will have an additional attacking option this weekend as Bournemouth loanee Harry Cornick has finally joined up with the squad after recovering from injury. Adys states that it's a big bonus, says he's very direct with good pace, he's got good end product, so that can only be a bonus, and hopefully he can hit the ground running, because he's going to have to, because we've only got 7 games left. Inside, Amar trying to find positive vibe. Me and Boz spoke about Amar as a captain in our Monday review. He isn't skipper material for me, but we're going to have to just get on with it. But the same as Adys in his press conference, Max here seems to generally be talking about we can't afford to get nervous, we can't afford to get caught up in any negativity. Rory Donnelly on the men, fighting fit for the weekend, fingers crossed. Adys touched on it again, said that he's available. So there's a little bit about Billy Knott sadly missed out on a trip to Wembley in the FA Trophy with Lincoln. They sadly got knocked out in the semi-finals to York City. John Egan is mentioned. Great news for him, ex-Gillingham centre-back who's in the squad of 27 for the Republic of Ireland for their games over the coming few days. So that's absolutely superb for him. We wish him all the best and hopefully he gets some minutes. Welcome return, we've already spoke about that, Josh Wright. And then there's an interesting column with Finn O'Mara, who's just signed his first professional contract. He talks for the Shouting Men, talks about things he still has to do in terms of like an apprenticeship, a bit old-fashioned, which is great to see that they still do them type of things. So yeah, there's plenty to be going on with in the paper. But yeah, back to Peterborough themselves, not in the greatest form as we've already said. Looking at individuals in terms of stats, obviously Tom Nichols will be a threat. He could have a field day if we're not at it defensively. He's scored on a pretty regular basis this season. If we can just get his stats up, it's been a shrewd signing from Exeter, and he's made the step up pretty well from League Two. He's got 13 in all competitions in 45 games, which ain't a disaster at all in your first full campaign at League One level, so fair play. He's only a young lad, probably still learning the game. We'd take a striker who's got 13, I think. He's got 3 in his last 7. Most recently in the 3-3 draw at Chesterfield, so he's been pretty consistent. He doesn't score. I think he had a bit of a drought, sort of end of August through till middle of October. But apart from that, he's found the net on a regular basis, so he'll be a threat. But he's not the only one. They've got other good players. I like Ryan Tavazzoli at centre half. I banded him about the summer of last season when I did a blog piece regarding potential signings when he was at Mansfield. I think he's well equipped for this level, and again he's the type of player that Peterborough buy, and Daryl McAntony likes to get into the football club, ones that are young and hungry and that can improve. And he sells most of them on for a profit, which is great, but all the time they're at the club they're serving a purpose and having a good positive impact. So he's a good defender. He's someone I think we could do with at the moment. And then another couple of names that stand out, I don't know how to pronounce it, is it Gwyn or Gwion Edwards, the Welsh lad who arrived in the summer. He's done all right in midfield. He's since arriving, he's had a pretty steady season. Looking at that, he's played 40 times, he's got 9 goals, so that's not a bad output for a midfielder. And also they've got the young lad in goal, I think Luke McGee, Australian I believe, who's on loan from Tottenham Hotspur of the Premier League. So yeah, they've got some quality. We know that they'll cause a threat, and like Adys said, it just depends on which Peterborough turns up to the Priestfield and in Kent on Saturday. We all hope it's the one that's pretty inconsistent and doesn't play well, but if it's the good Peterborough, so to speak, then we're going to be in for a real battle. In terms of a prediction, excuse me, just dropped the newspaper. A lot could depend on how many players we can get fit and available, and obviously, like we said, which Peterborough turns up. Right, I'll have to do it. Yeah, Hart says a nervy 2-1 Gillingham win. Head says high scoring, open, poor defensive 2-2 draw. But really hope it's the first, because otherwise we're going to be in a little bit of trouble. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thanks for the ongoing support. We shall see you for Matchday Live, huge game. And until then, up the Gills.